Shirley MacLaine waited until 91 to drop this bombshell. For decades, she smiled through interviews while hiding the real story of what happened behind the scenes. Now, she reveals the real reason she needed separate trailers, different shooting schedules, and even different publicity tours. From on-set screaming matches to the jealous rivalries that turned movie sets into battlegrounds, Hollywood's most brutally honest star is holding nothing back. Shirley MacLaine was born in Richmond, Virginia, in the middle of the Great Depression. Her father worked several jobs to keep the family going. He taught psychology, helped run schools, and sold real estate when he had to. Her mother came from Canada and had a background in drama. That influence would later shape Shirley's entire future. They named her after Shirley Temple, who was already a child star at the time. It almost felt like a sign. Her younger brother, Warren Beatty, would also end up in Hollywood, though he spelled their last name differently. Growing up, the family moved around a lot, town to town across Virginia, as her dad changed jobs. Shirley was raised Baptist, but she'd eventually branch out into more spiritual beliefs. As a kid, she wasn't just artistic. She was athletic, too. She even played baseball with the boys and got the nickname Powerhouse because she hit more home runs than any of them. But before all that, Shirley had a problem with her ankles. They were weak, and she kept falling. To fix this, her mom put her in ballet classes. What started as therapy turned into obsession. She loved it. She trained at the Washington School of Ballet and never missed a single class. She was taller than the other girls, so she often got cast as male characters in performances. During one show, she even broke her ankle backstage, but tightened her shoes and danced anyway. That was Shirley. Tough, focused, and never one to quit. And never won. Still, she eventually realized she didn't have the right feet for ballet, literally, so she walked away from it. She didn't waste time figuring out her next step. Before even finishing high school, she headed to New York for auditions. She landed a small role in a subway version of Oklahoma and caught the theater bug for good. As soon as she graduated in 1952, she left Arlington and moved to New York City. Her name? Shirley MacLaine Beatty, was too tricky for producers to pronounce, so she tweaked it. She used her mother's maiden name and became Shirley MacLaine. That new name would soon be in lights. She started out in this chorus of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Me and Juliet, and even though she was just another dancer in the background, people noticed her. Then came her shot. She got hired as an understudy in The Pajama Game. The lead, Carol Haney, got injured, and Shirley had to fill in. It wasn't just a lucky break. It was life-changing. Her performance blew everyone away, including producer Hal B. Wallace, who happened to be in the audience. A few months later, it happened again. Haney was injured, Shirley filled in, and this time Wallace made a move. Just like that, Shirley went from a backup dancer to a Hollywood actress. Wallace offered her a 5-year contract with Paramount. It was the 1950s. Old-school studio Hollywood was still hanging on, but the cracks were starting to show. Wallace had a reputation for spotting stars early, and he saw something unique in Shirley. She didn't even get a chance to settle in. 3 months later, she was in Vermont, filming her debut with none other than Alfred Hitchcock in The Trouble with Harry. It was a weird, dark comedy, and Shirley's performance was so fresh that she won a Golden Globe for Best New Actress. After that, she was off to the races. Her next big role was in the star-studded Around the World in 80 Days. What people didn't know at the time was that Shirley was pregnant during filming. She gave birth to her daughter, Sachi, soon after. But instead of staying home, Shirley and her husband, Steve Parker, agreed that Sachi would live in Japan with her father and his mistress, while Shirley focused on her career. It was a strange setup that would later cause deep tension between mother and daughter. In 1958, she finally broke through as a serious actress. Frank Sinatra personally picked her for the role of Ginny in Some Came Running. The part was supposed to go to Marilyn Monroe, but when that didn't work out, Shirley stepped in. She dove into the role completely, brought a stuffed toy dog to set, stayed in character off camera, and nailed the part. Sinatra knew what he was doing. He told the director to have her character die in the film, predicting it would help her get an Oscar nomination. He was right. The performance got Shirley her first Academy Award nod and proved she wasn't just a comic actress. But behind the scenes, things weren't so glamorous. Wallace, the man who had discovered her, reportedly made unwanted advances. According to Shirley, he once forced himself on her, and she slapped him hard in response. She eventually sued him over contract issues and won. Years later, she punched a Hollywood reporter in the mouth after he wrote something disrespectful about her. That story made headlines, and it showed just how much she refused to be pushed around. By 1960, she teamed up with director Billy Wilder and actor Jack Lemmon for what would become one of the most iconic films of the era, The Apartment. She played Fran Kubelik, a vulnerable woman caught in a complicated office romance. The movie was a massive success. It got 10 Oscar nominations, and Shirley earned her second nomination for Best Actress. She didn't win that year, but her performance was unforgettable. She did win awards overseas and gained worldwide recognition for the role. Years later, Charlize Theron would say Shirley made the black and white film feel like it was in color. During the 1960s, Shirley MacLaine was right at the center of Hollywood's golden era. She wasn't just another pretty face chasing fame. She was taking real chances, both with the roles she chose and the stories she wanted to tell. In 1961, she shocked everyone by starring in The Children's Hour. It was a bold move. She played Martha Doby, a woman who quietly confessed her romantic feelings for her best friend, played by Audrey Hepburn. At the time, just hinting at a lesbian relationship was considered scandalous. The Hays Code still labeled homosexuality as sexual perversion, so what MacLaine did wasn't just risky, it was revolutionary. Even more surprising, she later revealed that she and Hepburn never even talked about the story's core theme. That silence said a lot about how taboo the subject still was. The film ends in tragedy, with MacLaine's character taking her own life, and sadly, that became a pattern in Hollywood. Kill off the gay character. Still, she had opened a door others were too afraid to touch. Only 2 years later, in 1963, MacLaine went in a completely different direction and starred in Irma la Douce. This time, she played the charming Parisian prostitute, and people loved it. She nailed the role so well, it earned her another Oscar nomination and a Golden Globe win. What really stands out is how deeply she prepared for the part. She and Jack Lemmon actually spent time with a real sex worker to understand the life better. That meeting was so real, the woman had to leave in the middle of it to see a client. The movie became a box office hit, pulling in over $25 million when it only cost $5 million to make. Adjusted for today, that's like raking in hundreds of millions. It could have been a Marilyn Monroe film, but she walked away after reading rude things the director had said about her. MacLaine took the role and made it unforgettable. Even Lemmon had been warned against doing it because of the pimp character, but it all paid off. In the Netherlands, the film broke records. Almost a third of the country saw it. Then came Sweet Charity in 1969. MacLaine didn't just star in it, she made it happen. She pitched the idea to Universal, insisted on Bob Fosse as the director, and pulled it all together. Fosse had never directed a film before, but MacLaine trusted him. Years earlier, he had given her a big break, and now she returned the favor. The project was expensive, $20 million back then, which would be like $150 million today. And even though it didn't make much money, it showed how fearless she was. What's wild is that the original Broadway role had been created for Gwen Verdon, Fosse's wife, but she didn't get the part. The studio wanted a bigger name. MacLaine was that name. The result was iconic. Her performance in the number If My Friends Could See Me Now is still talked about, showing off the dance skills she'd been sharpening since her early days on stage. Behind the scenes, things weren't smooth. Fosse wanted to keep the raw, gritty tone, while the producer wanted something shinier. MacLaine stood by Fosse the whole way. Despite all the risk-taking, MacLaine kept her star power strong. Throughout the 60s, she was nominated for Golden Globes 5 times and won 2. Studios respected her enough to back her choices, even replacing a top producer on Sweet Charity, because he didn't see eye to eye with Fosse. That kind of influence was rare for any actor, especially a woman in that era. And she didn't just chase money. She took time off from Hollywood to support George McGovern's presidential campaign in the early 70s. By the end of the decade, she was one of the highest-paid actresses in the business. She was offered huge contracts, like $750,000 for a project that never even got made. That's over $6 million in today's money, just to keep her name attached. Shirley MacLaine met Steve Parker in a Manhattan pub in 1952, and just 4 hours after they were introduced, he proposed. It was impulsive, exciting, and deeply romantic. They didn't get married right away. She was still trying to make it on Broadway, working as an understudy in The Pajama Game. But by 1954, they finally tied the knot, just as her Hollywood career was about to explode. That success, though, would put a strain on their relationship. Parker once told her, "If I stay in Hollywood, I'll always be Mr. MacLaine." So he moved to Japan in 1956 to carve out his own path as a film producer. And from that moment on, they lived on different continents. Still, they stayed married for 28 years, keeping what MacLaine later called her primary relationship, even as the rest of the world found it hard to understand. That same year, their daughter Sachi was born. Shirley called it life-changing, and for a short while, they seemed like the perfect family. But Shirley was on fire in Hollywood, making 25 films in just 15 years. She starred alongside legends, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Audrey Hepburn. Staying home wasn't even a question for her. She said she never would have quit acting to be a full-time mom, because if she had, the frustration would have been worse for everyone. That mindset shaped her relationship with Sachi. And decades later, it would all come back to the surface when Sachi told her side of the story. Even from the Shirley and Steve's marriage was anything but ordinary. Long before open marriage was a household phrase, they were living it. She explained it simply. He lived in Japan. She lived in America. They did what they wanted, but stayed connected. Shirley had no shame about it. She was open about the men she was with, actors, politicians, even a prime minister or two. People didn't get it, but she didn't care. To her, that freedom was what kept the marriage going. But then, at just 6 years old, Sachi was sent to live full-time with her father in Japan. Shirley had her reasons: a nanny who drank, rumors of kidnapping, and a belief that Hollywood wasn't safe for kids. She only saw her daughter during summers. At the time, Sachi said she never felt abandoned. But as she got older, the story changed. In her 2013 memoir, she said she felt lonely and forgotten. She told stories of being left alone at boarding school for Christmas, of being cut off from money, and of a job offer Shirley made up to break up one of Sachi's relationships. Shirley called the book mostly fiction, but the damage was already done. Years earlier, Shirley had shocked the world with another confession. On Oprah's show in 2011, she admitted that during a political campaign in the 70s, she'd slept with 3 different people in one day because she didn't want to be left out. It wasn't a stunt. It was just part of who she was. She talked about falling in love with her co-stars, though she drew the line at Jack Lemmon, who was too nice, and Jack Nicholson, who was too dangerous. By then, she was no longer chasing men. Her rat terrier, Terry, had become her greatest companion. She said, "I'd rather have a funny, loyal dog than a man." And she meant it. Her off-screen life was wild, but her career stayed just as bold. In 1970, she starred opposite Clint Eastwood in 2 Mules for Sister Sarah, and the two clashed from day one. Director Don Siegel called her unfeminine and said she had too much balls. Everyone on set felt the tension. And to make things worse, most of the crew got sick in Mexico. Still, the film made money, but it was the last time Clint Eastwood ever took second billing. Maybe the experience with Shirley had something to do with that. Then, in 1975, she surprised everyone by producing a documentary about China. The country had just started opening up to the West, and Shirley got rare access to film everyday life there. The result, The Other Half of the Sky, was powerful and even earned an Oscar nomination. It showed a side of her people hadn't seen before. Someone who wasn't just an actress, but a woman with political awareness and a global view. That new side of her came after a long break from acting. Between 1970 and 1977, she practically vanished from Hollywood. But she wasn't idle. She traveled to remote places, lived with tribes in Africa, explored India, and even climbed mountains in Bhutan. She wasn't just sightseeing. These were spiritual journeys. She got into meditation, reincarnation, and metaphysics. When she came back in The Turning Point, critics noticed the change. She wasn't playing the clown anymore. She had depth, stillness, and something more profound. But even her comeback wasn't smooth. On the set of The Turning Point, she clashed with director Herbert Ross. She thought he was arrogant. They fought over how her character should be portrayed. She wanted to show the psychological struggle of a woman who gave up everything for her family, a story she knew well. The film was a hit, even though it didn't win any Oscars despite 11 nominations. But it showed that Shirley MacLaine was no longer just playing roles. She was telling her truth, both on screen and off. Shirley MacLaine's early 1980s weren't just a career high. They were a storm of feuds, drama, and controversy that still echo through Hollywood. It all kicked off in 1980 during the filming of A Change of Seasons with Anthony Hopkins. What was supposed to be a romantic drama turned into a cold war between two stars who could barely stand the sight of each other. Hopkins later said Shirley was the most obnoxious actress he ever worked with. Their acting styles clashed, their personalities clashed, and even the production fell apart with director being replaced mid-shoot. The crew had to schedule scenes just to keep them away from each other. And decades later, when asked about him, Shirley didn't miss a beat. "I don't like him either, but if that was bad, it was nothing compared to what came next." In 1983, Shirley took on Terms of Endearment, and that's where the real fireworks began. Her co-star was Deborah Winger, younger, wilder, and ready to fight for every inch of screen space. From the moment they met, sparks flew. Shirley showed up in movie star fur coats, Winger combat boots, and a miniskirt. The director, James L. Brooks, didn't stop it. He let the chaos play out, hoping it would turn into chemistry on camera. And maybe it did. But off camera, the set turned into a battlefield. There were shouting matches. There were hours lost when neither actress would leave her trailer. And there were moments no one could believe actually happened. Like the time Winger, in the middle of a rehearsal, walked off, turned around, lifted her skirt, and farted at Shirley. Or the moment she licked Shirley's leg while Jack Nicholson stood frozen next to them. She'd show up late just to throw Shirley off, mock her age, and stir the pot every chance she got. When asked years later, Winger didn't deny it, just smirked and said there was something true in there. Then came the battle for top billing. Winger wanted her name first. Shirley had decades in the business, Oscar nominations, and legacy. Winger had a hot streak and wasn't afraid to push. It got so bad that Paramount had to step in and cut a deal. Shirley would get top billing in the United States, Winger overseas. But the damage was done. During the press junkets, they had to be kept apart. At the premiere, they sat on opposite ends of the theater. Hollywood was buzzing. Everyone knew this wasn't just a film. It was a war. But Shirley won the final round. On April 9th, 1984, both actresses sat in the same room, nominated for Best Actress. When Laurence Olivier opened that envelope and said Shirley MacLaine's name, it wasn't just an award. It was a knockout punch. She walked to the stage, held her Oscar, and declared, "I deserve this." Winger tried to smile. It didn't land. Shirley threw a compliment her way, calling her performance turbulent brilliance, but it came off sharp, and everyone knew it. It was over. Shirley had won, on screen and off. That same year, her life off-screen was shifting too. She finalized her divorce from Steve Parker, the man she'd been married to since 1954. They had lived on different continents in what she described as an open marriage. He stayed in Japan. She worked in Hollywood. Their daughter, Sachi, grew up mostly with her father, and the emotional scars would show years later in her memoir. But even after it ended, Shirley still called Parker the love of her life, then came out on a limb. In 1983, she released the book that flipped her image upside down. It wasn't about acting. It was about past lives, UFOs, spirits, and out-of-body experiences. It became a bestseller and a punchline. Letterman mocked her. She clapped back, calling him an asshole. People laughed, but they kept reading. And when ABC aired a mini-series based on the book in 1987, 30 million people tuned in. There were scenes of Shirley flying to the moon, meeting aliens, and channeling spirits. Critics were baffled. Audiences were split. But Shirley didn't flinch. "It's all true," she told Larry King. She meant every word. And that wasn't even the weirdest part. Shirley later said she had lived in Atlantis, that her ex-husband had murdered her in a past life as a Mongolian nomad, that she was the spiritual sibling of a 35,000-year-old warrior spirit named Ramtha, channeled by a woman who drank red wine while speaking in an ancient accent. Carl Sagan called it nonsense. Her fans weren't so sure. But Shirley? She just kept going, unapologetic and totally fearless. Shirley MacLaine was a Hollywood legend with a long, celebrated career. But behind the scenes, her daughter Sachi Parker lived a very different story, one filled with distance, confusion, and heartbreak. Sachi was only 2 years old when she was sent to live with her father in Japan. Instead of being raised by either parent, she grew up under the care of a governess, while her father battled alcoholism. Shirley, meanwhile, was busy becoming a global star, rarely visiting and never truly present. Every visit felt more like a meeting with a stranger than a reunion with a mother. As Sachi grew older, she tried to make sense of her unusual upbringing. She finally told her story in a memoir titled Lucky Me, hoping it might bring some kind of peace or even a closer bond with her mother. But what she revealed was far from ordinary. She described being told by Shirley that her father was a clone and that her real father was an astronaut in another galaxy. Shirley dismissed the book entirely, calling it fiction, but Sachi stood by her story. Despite her efforts, the emotional distance between them only grew. She admitted that the happy ending she had always hoped for would likely never come. While that chapter of Shirley's life was unraveling in the press, she was experiencing a creative comeback. In 2002, she played the role of Mary Kay Ash in Hell on Heels, a film about the cosmetics industry. It was a sharp, entertaining performance that critics praised, and it even got her a Golden Globe nomination. Shirley brought the character to life with confidence and charm, reminding everyone that her talent was still very much intact. Then, in 2005, Shirley returned to the big screen in a big way. She appeared in 3 major films: Bewitched, In Her Shoes, and Rumor Has It, all in the same year. She played everything from magical matriarchs to wise, no-nonsense grandmothers. These roles reignited her career and introduced her to a younger generation of moviegoers. Over the next few years, she stayed busy with roles in Valentine's Day, Closing the Ring, and Bernie, proving that age hadn't dimmed her spark. By 2012, Shirley made another unexpected move. She joined the cast of Downton Abbey. Her role as Martha Levinson, the loud and confident American mother-in-law, stirred things up in the prim and proper British household. Her scenes with Maggie Smith were fan favorites, full of sharp wit and cultural clash. Shirley said she hadn't even watched the show before getting the role, but once on set, she admired the elegance of the production and felt proud to be part of it. As she continued working, awards and honors followed. The Golden Globes gave her the Cecil B. DeMille Award in 1998. In 2012, she received the AFI Life Achievement Award, with stars like Julia Roberts and Jack Nicholson showing up to honor her. Then, in 2013, President Obama awarded her the Kennedy Center honor. These weren't just trophies. They were a recognition of a lifetime dedicated to the arts, from her early Broadway days to her final film roles. At 90 years old, Shirley MacLaine is still as bold and unfiltered as ever. She recently made a confession that turned heads in Hollywood. She couldn't stand working with Anthony Perkins. The two starred together in The Matchmaker back in 1958, but behind the scenes, things weren't so pretty. She earned $25,000 for the film, while Perkins made $75,000 for doing the same job. Ironically, Perkins was the one who pushed for her to get equal pay, but that didn't help their on-set relationship. Shirley said she always felt uneasy around him. The energy between them was just off. She once said she could never figure out who Perkins really was. "I don't know what's an act and what isn't," she admitted. At the time, Perkins was secretly battling with his own identity, pressured by the studio to end his relationship with Tab Hunter and even go through conversion therapy. Shirley didn't know the full story back then, but the distance between them left a lasting impression. Today, she's not trying to fix the past. She's made peace with her need for solitude, and even prefers it. In her memoir, I'm Over All That, she said flat out that she'd take her little dog Terry over a man any day. She wasn't joking. Her bond with that rat terrier was so strong, she even co-wrote a book with him, Out on a Leash. Each chapter flips between her voice and the dog's, as they tackle everything from gay rights to alien life. As strange as that sounds, Shirley made it work. She claimed their bond went deeper than most people would believe. In fact, she believed they had already lived a life together in ancient Egypt. That's just Shirley, blending the mystical with the personal, and always with a wink. Even now, she keeps writing. Her later books are full of raw honesty, strange ideas, and reflections that blur the line between Hollywood gossip and spiritual insight. In Sagging While Aging, she opened up about getting older, questioning medicine, and embracing things like acupuncture and homeopathy. Moving to a quiet house in Santa Fe gave her the space to dive deeper into these thoughts. She talks a lot about synchronicity, how the weird little coincidences in life might actually be signs of something more. For Shirley, life has always been about more than fame or fortune. It's been about understanding who we are, why we're here, and what comes next. Even in a world that's rushing forward with technology, she's one of the few still asking, what about the soul? And maybe that's why, after all these years, people are still listening.